She thought she had buried her past, until her husky Balto led her to a forgotten train car deep in the forest. Inside, she found ashes, letters, and a century-old secret powerful enough to destroy lives. But uncovering the truth would cost her everything, even the one soul who never left her side. Before we begin, tell us, where are you watching from? And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because the next story will chill you even deeper. The first snow of November fell like fine ash, coating the rusted tracks behind the forgotten town of Millcrest. The world felt emptied, hollowed out, as if everything that once moved through these valleys, trains, people, laughter, had long since vanished. Only the wind remained, dragging its cold fingers across the rails, whispering the ghosts of iron and steam. Evelyn Hale trudged through the frostbitten weeds, her breath curling into the pale afternoon air. Her boots cracked the thin crust of ice covering the earth. She had walked this path many times before, not because it led anywhere useful, but because it led away from town, from sympathy, from memory. Beside her trotted a husky with steel-gray fur and blue eyes sharp as winter light. His name was Balto, and he was all she had left that still breathed. 2 years had passed since the accident, the explosion on Line 12, the night the rails screamed and her husband and son were swallowed by fire. The newspapers had called it a mechanical failure. Evelyn called it the end of everything. After the funerals, the insurance denial, and the long months of staring at walls that no longer answered back, she had learned to live in quiet ruins. Now she rented a cabin miles from town, worked part-time cleaning offices, and avoided people who looked at her with pity. Balto tugged at the leash, his head low, ears pricked. He had caught a scent, something faint, metallic. Evelyn frowned. "What is it, boy?" The husky let out a soft growl, pulling harder toward the trees lining the old track. She hesitated. Beyond those trees, the land sloped into a hollow, where the abandoned spur of the old Millcrest Railway ran like a rusted scar. Locals said the line had been closed since the 60s after a bridge collapse. Kids used to dare each other to walk the tracks at night, claiming to hear phantom whistles. Evelyn followed, the leash tightening in her gloved hand. "All right," she murmured, "show me." The air grew colder the deeper they went. The sound of the town faded until there was only the crunch of her boots and Balto's paws. Between the trees, she glimpsed a shape long, dark, and unnatural against the pale snow. As they drew closer, the outline sharpened into something unmistakable. A train car, half buried in earth and silence. It stood alone on a dead-end track, its once blue paint blistered to rust, windows broken, steel sides scarred by time. The letters M and B line were barely visible under decades of grime. A thin veil of snow covered its roof like frost on a tombstone. Evelyn stopped a few yards away, her heart tightening. "What on earth?" Balto barked once, then whined softly, circling the car's base. Steam puffed from his nostrils as he sniffed at the old wheels. Evelyn stepped closer. The air smelled of iron, rot, and something else, something faintly sweet, like burned sugar. She touched the metal. It was freezing, colder than the surrounding air, as though the car had been sitting in shadow for a century. The heavy sliding door was half ajar, tilted on warped tracks. She pushed it with a grunt. It resisted, then yielded with a metallic groan that echoed across the trees. A gust of air spilled out, thick with dust and decay. Inside, the dim light revealed rows of overturned benches, heaps of rotted wood, and glass shards glittering like ice. The ceiling had peeled away in places, revealing the steel ribs beneath. Something about it all felt preserved, like a moment trapped in amber. Balto refused to enter. He stood at the threshold, his fur bristling, growling deep in his throat. "It's all right," Evelyn whispered, but her own voice shook. She turned on her flashlight, the beam slicing through the gloom. At first there was only ruin. Cobwebs hung from the handrails. A tangle of wire glinted near the far wall. But then she saw it, a small shape on the floor near the back, half buried in ash and debris. She approached slowly. It was a doll, its porcelain face cracked, one glass eye missing, its arm blackened as if burned. Around its neck hung a metal tag etched with numbers. 1912. Evelyn froze. Her flashlight trembled. She reached out and brushed away the soot. Beneath the doll's body, she found the faint outline of another object, a rusted plaque, bolted into the floorboards. She wiped the grime with her sleeve. The inscription, though corroded, was still legible. Car 17, Winters Foundation. Transport, authorized personnel only. Her pulse quickened. Winters Foundation. The name tugged at something distant in her memory, though she couldn't place it. She tried to lift the plaque, but it wouldn't budge. Beneath it, she could swear she heard a hollow echo, as if the floor concealed an empty space. Balto barked sharply, breaking her concentration. His hackles were up, his gaze fixed on the far end of the car. Evelyn turned her flashlight. For a split second, she thought she saw movement, a shadow sliding behind a row of broken seats. Her breath caught. "Hello," she called. Her voice came back to her in whispers, distorted by the metal walls. Nothing. Just the creaking of the old car as wind pushed against its sides. She swallowed hard. "It's just the draft," she told herself. "Old metal and nerves." But when she turned back toward the door, the doll had moved. Only an inch, maybe two, but it now faced her directly. Evelyn stumbled back, heart pounding. "No, no, no, no!" "What?" She shone the light again, trying to convince herself her eyes were playing tricks. But the tracks in the dust told the truth. Balto let out a low, warning growl. The air inside seemed to tighten, thick and heavy. Evelyn's flashlight flickered, dimmed, then died. Total darkness swallowed her. For one unbearable moment, there was silence. Then came the faint sound of metal shifting, slow, deliberate, from deep beneath the floor. Evelyn stumbled toward the exit, groping for the doorway. Her fingers brushed cold steel. She pulled herself out into the open air, gasping. Snowflakes drifted lazily through the twilight. Balto pressed close to her leg, whining softly. She crouched beside him, burying her face in his fur, trying to steady her breathing. The door behind her groaned again, but this time it wasn't the wind. It slid shut on its own, sealing the darkness inside. For a long time, Evelyn didn't move. The forest around her was utterly still. Even the wind had stopped. Finally, she whispered, "We're leaving." Balto barked once, sharp and certain, as if agreeing. They started back toward the trail, the rusted car fading into the white dusk behind them. But when Evelyn looked over her shoulder one last time, she saw something that rooted her to the spot. Through one of the broken windows, a light had appeared, faint, golden, flickering, like a lantern burning somewhere deep inside. She watched as it swayed slowly from side to side, as though carried by an unseen hand. The wind rose again, moaning across the rails, and from far off in the forest, beneath the ghostly echo of that wind, came another sound, soft, rhythmic, distant. The whistle of a train that no longer existed. Evelyn clutched Balto's collar. "We're not coming back here," she whispered. But even as she said it, she knew she was lying to herself and to the cold that waited inside that car. For when she closed her eyes that night, she dreamed of fire, of children crying, and of a woman's voice calling her name through the smoke. The morning after the discovery, the world seemed drained of color. Frost clung to the windows of Evelyn's cabin, turning the glass into opaque veins of ice. The air inside smelled faintly of damp wood and burnt coffee. Balto lay curled by the hearth, his blue eyes half open, watching her with quiet vigilance, as if sensing the storm that brewed inside her mind. Evelyn hadn't slept. The image of the train car burned behind her eyelids. The rusted walls, the scorched doll, the plaque marked 1912, and that light, the impossible golden glow swaying behind shattered glass. She told herself it had to be a reflection, a trick of the mind. But she'd seen it. She was certain. At dawn, she packed a flashlight, a crowbar, a thermos, and Balto's leash. She was going back. "Stay close," she whispered as they approached the tracks again, their footprints from yesterday already crusted over by a thin sheen of snow. The forest felt heavier now, as if watching. No birds, no wind, just the slow rhythmic sound of their steps on frozen ground. When the train car emerged from the fog, it seemed larger, more imposing. The metal glistened like black ice. Frost outlined every bolt and hinge in silver. Evelyn hesitated before touching the door. "Let's see what you're hiding," she murmured. The door resisted her first push. She wedged the crowbar into the gap and leaned with all her strength until the metal screeched in protest. The echo carried through the trees like a cry. Inside, the air was colder than outside, unnaturally so, the kind of cold that felt alive. Balto whined but followed her in. Evelyn's flashlight beam sliced through the dim interior. The doll was where she'd left it, sitting upright now against the far wall, its single glass eye glinting. Evelyn swallowed hard and forced her focus away. She scanned the floor. Near one of the seats, her boot hit something hollow. "Beneath the floor," she whispered, remembering the plaque. She crouched, brushing away the soot. There, hidden beneath warped wood, was a loose section of paneling. It took several minutes of prying, the crowbar slipping and scraping, until finally a plank came free with a crack of old nails. Inside was a small metal box, rusted almost beyond recognition. She lifted it carefully. The hinges protested, but it opened. Inside lay a stack of papers, blackened, brittle edges eaten by fire. On top, a small leather-bound notebook, its cover scorched but intact. Evelyn sat on one of the benches, wiping her gloved hands before opening the book. The first few pages were blank or water-stained, but deeper in, faint handwriting emerged, elegant, slanted, unmistakably feminine. March 3rd, 1912. The children are frightened tonight. The snow grows heavier and the engines strain against it. Mr. Wells insists we push through to the valley before dawn. He fears discovery more than the storm. I fear neither. Only what awaits these poor souls once the journey ends. Evelyn felt her heart pound. She turned the page. March 4th. The doctor assures me the tests are for the good of mankind. He smiles as he says it, as though repetition can make a lie true. I have hidden one of the vials. If they catch me, I will say it was lost in the confusion. The ink here had run, bled into the paper like veins. March 6th. The engine fire flickers. The children are coughing. Some sleep, others do not wake. I heard Mr. Wells arguing with the conductor. He said the Foundation's name must never appear in the reports if something goes wrong. I fear it already has. The last entries were almost unreadable. The writing slanted, desperate. March 7th. The fire. Dear God, the fire. The door jammed from the outside. I tried, oh how I tried, but the smoke, I can hear them still. If anyone finds this, please tell them they were innocent. Beneath the ashes lies the key. The truth must not stay buried. Evelyn stared at the final line, her breath trembling. The ink had pooled there, smudged by what looked like tears. Beneath the ashes lies the key. Balto whined, his nose pressed against a spot by the opposite wall. Evelyn knelt beside him, brushing away soot and ash. Her fingers touched metal. A small brass compartment latch, nearly invisible against the scorched wood. She pulled it open. Inside was another box, smaller, sealed tight. She lifted it into the light. The latch clicked open with surprising ease. Inside were folded letters, sealed with wax that had melted and reformed long ago. She unfolded the first one, the paper so fragile it felt like breathing on it might destroy it. Dearest Clara, your work will not be forgotten. The Foundation appreciates your dedication. However, the situation aboard Train 17 must remain confidential. The public is not ready for the truth of our research. Do not contact the families. We will handle the matter from here. G. Wells. The signature was elegant, arrogant. Evelyn felt nausea rise. A second letter bore no signature, only typed words. To whom it may concern. The casualties aboard Transport 17 are to be recorded as a rail accident. Any mention of medical cargo or experimental personnel is strictly forbidden. Evelyn's fingers trembled as she folded the letter back. Experiments, she whispered. Children. Balto's ears perked up suddenly. His body stiffened, gaze fixed on the open doorway. Then she heard it too. The crunch of snow. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Someone was outside. Evelyn's heart slammed against her ribs. She turned off her flashlight, plunging the car into shadow. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. Balto growled low, a warning rumble that vibrated in his chest. A voice broke the silence. Rough. Male. Weathered. Didn't think anyone had ever come back here? Evelyn froze. The voice came closer, now just beyond the threshold. She could see the faint beam of another flashlight slicing through the dust. Who's there? She called, her own voice shaking. The light stopped moving. You shouldn't be here, the man said. Some things ought to stay buried. Before she could respond, the flashlight turned off. Darkness swallowed everything. Balto barked once, loud and sharp. The echo bounced through the car like thunder. Then the sound of footsteps receded fast, retreating into the snow. Evelyn waited, her pulse hammering. Finally, she turned her own light back on. The letter still lay in her lap, untouched. The box beside her. The air felt thicker now, charged, as if the very walls had absorbed the fear that once lived here. She looked down at Balto. We're leaving, she whispered again. But as they stepped into the fading light of afternoon, Evelyn knew she couldn't. Not yet. The diary's words followed her out, clinging to her like smoke. Beneath the ashes lies the key. She turned once more toward the silent car. The wind moved softly through the trees, carrying faint echoes of something that almost sounded like children's laughter. Too distant to be real, too near to ignore. Evelyn clutched the letters to her chest, feeling their fragile weight like a heartbeat against her palm. The truth was out there, buried in soot and silence. And whatever that man was hiding, it was something powerful enough to kill for perhaps something that already had. As she and Balto disappeared down the path, the golden light flickered once more inside the train car, pulsing like a dying breath. The snow began to fall again, covering their footprints as if the forest itself wished to erase the evidence of what she'd found. The next morning broke gray and silent, a world suspended in frost. The forest outside Evelyn's cabin looked drained of life, every branch encased in glassy ice. Inside, the fireplace crackled weakly, fighting against the cold that seeped through the walls. Balto slept near the door, his breathing shallow but restless, as if he, too, dreamed of what they'd found. Evelyn sat at the table, the letters spread before her like a confession. Her hands still smelled faintly of rust and smoke. Every line she'd read the night before replayed in her mind, the talk of medical cargo, the insistence on silence, the chilling authority of Dr. G. Wells, the Winters Foundation. It wasn't just an old charity, as she'd assumed. It had been something else entirely, something dark. She turned the letters over, searching for any clue, any forgotten note. On one envelope, she noticed faint indentations, something pressed hard enough to leave an impression on the paper. She held it to the light, squinting. The words emerged slowly. Storage beneath rear compartment. Her breath caught. Beneath. The words from the diary echoed again. Beneath the ashes lies the key. Balto lifted his head, ears pricking. You hear it too, don't you? She murmured. He wagged his tail once, as if confirming. By mid-morning, they were back at the rail yard. The snow had deepened overnight, half burying the rails. The sky hung low and bruised, threatening more. The train car waited in silence, the door slightly ajar again, though she was certain she'd closed it. She froze. Someone's been here. Balto sniffed the ground, tail stiff. No fresh tracks, only snow, wind-scoured and smooth. Evelyn exhaled a shaky breath and stepped inside. The air was colder than before, so cold her flashlight flickered against the frost. Her breath came out in pale clouds. The interior looked undisturbed except for one thing. The doll was gone. She felt the bottom drop out of her stomach. It had been lying near the wall last night. Now only a faint outline in the dust marked where it had been. "All right," she whispered, voice trembling. "If this is your idea of a game—" Balto whined, pacing. His claws clicked against the floorboards. Evelyn forced herself to focus. The note storage beneath rear compartment. She moved toward the end of the car where the seats were half collapsed, clearing debris. She tapped the floor with her crowbar, listening. A hollow echo answered back. "There," she breathed. She pried up the boards. Underneath lay a narrow compartment filled with ash and splintered wood. For a moment she thought it was empty. Then, half buried in the soot, something glinted, a small golden object, warm in color despite the cold. She reached for it. The shape emerged from the ash shell key, delicate and ornate, its bow engraved with a single letter, W. Her heart thudded. Winters. She brushed it clean and turned it over. On the shaft, barely visible beneath the grime, were etched numbers. 1712. Car 17, 1912. Balto barked once, startling her. He was digging near the base of the wall, scattering dust. "What is it, boy?" She knelt, shining the light. Beneath the wood, something metal protruded, just a corner. Together they cleared more debris until a small iron latch came into view, nearly fused with rust. Evelyn's hands shook as she inserted the key. To her astonishment, it turned. The lock clicked, and a hidden panel popped open. Inside, wrapped in decaying burlap, was a cylindrical metal container the length of her forearm. She pulled it out, the weight surprising. Etched along the side, Winters Foundation Research Division. Her pulse quickened. She unscrewed the lid, coughing as a cloud of dust escaped. Inside lay several glass vials filled with an amber-colored liquid, still sealed with wax. Each label bore faded words. Subject Batch A Cryothermic Study. Others read Cognitive Response Trial and Adolescent Serum Test. The air in the car felt suddenly thinner. Evelyn's stomach twisted. "Oh my God," she whispered. "They weren't passengers. They were test subjects." She sat heavily on a bench, the cylinder clutched in her hands. The diary's fragments pieced themselves together in her mind. Clara Winters, a nurse or scientist, trying to save the children. The train had been a mobile laboratory. The fire hadn't been an accident, it had been a cover-up. Balto growled suddenly. The sound was deep, primal. Evelyn snapped her head up. Someone was outside. Through the crack in the door, she saw a faint light bobbing. Another flashlight. The same voice she'd heard before carried through the snow. "You shouldn't have come back." Evelyn's grip tightened around the cylinder. "Show yourself," she called, her voice sharper than she felt. The figure appeared in the doorway. A man heavy-set, mid-50s, wearing a thick coat and cap. His face was weathered, but his eyes were cold, calculating. "Put that down," he said, stepping inside. "It doesn't belong to you." Balto growled, teeth bared. Evelyn stood her ground. "Who are you?" "Someone who's been keeping this place quiet for a very long time." His gaze flicked to the cylinder. "You don't know what you're holding." "I know enough," she said. "Those children died because of what your people did." The man sighed, almost pitying. "Lady, you have no idea what kind of trouble you're stirring. The Winters Foundation may be gone, but its heirs are very much alive, and they don't like loose ends." He took a step closer. Balto barked, snarling, but the man drew something from his coat, a gun, small but steady. "Move aside, dog." Evelyn's breath caught. "You're not taking it." He smiled faintly. "You think anyone will believe you? Some broken woman living in the woods? This story dies here, just like the others did." He raised the gun. Balto lunged. The shot shattered the silence. The report echoed through the steel walls like thunder. Evelyn screamed as Balto collided with the man, sending him sprawling. The gun clattered across the floor. Balto yelped, a terrible, strangled sound, and fell limp. No! Evelyn dropped beside him. Blood spread through his white fur, staining the snow-dusted floor. His eyes met hers, full of pain and confusion. The man groaned, crawling toward the gun. Evelyn's grief turned to rage. She grabbed the crowbar and swung with all her strength. The metal connected with his wrist. The gun flew from his hand. He cried out, clutching the wound. "Get out!" she screamed. "Get out before I finish what you started!" He scrambled to his feet and stumbled out into the snow, disappearing into the trees. Evelyn dropped the crowbar and turned back to Balto. His breathing was shallow, his body trembling. "Stay with me, baby. Please, stay with me." She pressed her hands against the wound, tears blurring her vision. "You saved me. You always do." Balto licked her wrist weakly, his tail twitching once before going still. Evelyn froze. "No, no, no." She buried her face in his fur, the warmth fading beneath her hands. The cold crept in around them, swallowing the sound of her sobs. When she finally lifted her head, the world outside was utterly silent. Snow drifted through the broken door, landing gently on Balto's still body. Evelyn reached for the golden key, now lying on the floor beside him. She clenched it tightly in her fist. "You wanted me to find this," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "You gave your life for it." Through her tears, she noticed something she hadn't before. The faint outline of initials etched on the key's other side. K.W. Clara Winters. The realization struck her like a heartbeat. The key wasn't just to the compartment, it was a message. Clara had hidden the evidence, and now, more than a century later, another woman had unearthed it. Evelyn wiped her face and stood. Her grief hardened into resolve. She gathered the vials, the letters, the key, and the diary, wrapping them carefully in her coat. Then, for the first time in 2 years, she allowed herself to speak aloud to someone she'd lost. "I couldn't save you," she whispered to Balto, her tears falling freely. "But I can save them." As she stepped out into the blizzard, the forest swallowed her form. Behind her, the train car loomed like a dark monument. Through the shattered window, the golden light flickered again, brighter this time, as if the dead were watching, waiting, and beneath the cold wind's cry, faint but unmistakable, came the sound of a whistle, long, low, sorrowful. The train was moving again. Snow blanketed the hills by dawn, turning the valley into a white sea where silence felt almost holy. Evelyn trudged through it, her body numb, her heart raw. In her arms she carried a canvas bag filled with the remnants of truth, the diary, the golden key, the vials and the letters. She didn't look back toward the forest where Balto's body lay wrapped in her old coat beneath the twisted pines. The earth there was frozen solid, and she had marked the grave with an iron rail spike. It was all she could give him, a soldier's marker for a loyal soul. She reached the road as daylight bled into gray. Her truck refused to start twice before the engine coughed to life, sputtering like it too, resisted moving on. She drove toward town, her eyes hollow in the reflection of the windshield, the golden key hanging from the rearview mirror on a piece of string. It swung with each turn, a glint of light in a world gone cold. At the library, she found the only person she trusted, Professor Marcus Chen, a retired historian from the community college, known for his obsession with forgotten archives. Evelyn burst into his office, snow still in her hair. "Marcus, I found something," she said, dropping the bag on his desk. He blinked, pushing aside his coffee mug. "Evelyn, good God, you look like you've been through a war." "I have." She opened the diary, the letters, the cylinder. "Do you know the Winters Foundation?" His face drained of color. "That name hasn't been spoken here in decades. They funded early industrial research before World War I. Medicine, refrigeration, biological studies. Then they disappeared overnight." "They didn't disappear," she said softly. "They buried themselves." For hours they examined the contents under the lamp's sterile glow. Marcus photographed each page, each label, each signature. When he reached the vials, he whistled softly. This is pre-regulation biochemical research, cryogenics, cognitive enhancement, experimental serums. My God, they were testing on children. Evelyn's voice trembled. There was a nurse on board, Clara Winters. She tried to stop them. Marcus read the diary in silence. When he finished, his eyes were glassy. You realize what this means? This isn't just history. The Winters Corporation evolved. Their patents seeded half of modern chemical medicine. If this goes public, it will, Evelyn said. I'm done being quiet. That afternoon, they uploaded everything. Scans of the diary, photos of the vials, the letters. Evelyn wrote the headline herself. The Train That Never Arrived, The Lost Experiments of 1912. Within hours, it spread. Independent journalists picked it up. Forums lit with speculation. The descendants of the Winters Board issued a statement calling it an unfounded conspiracy. But within days, old patent records surfaced confirming Dr. G. Wells's name on the first serum patents in 1913, 1 year after the train fire. Threats followed. Anonymous emails, unmarked cars idling near Evelyn's house. But she wasn't afraid anymore. She had already lost everything that mattered, except his memory. When the police finally uncovered the body of the man who had attacked her, the ex-security officer of the defunct foundation, the town grew quiet again. His death was ruled accidental, a fall into the river after a blizzard. Evelyn didn't attend the inquest. She was at Balto's grave, lighting a single candle that flickered against the snow. I kept my promise, she whispered. You didn't die for nothing. Weeks passed. Investigations deepened. Federal archives reopened the Winters files. Scientists denounced the practices as unethical and criminal. Evelyn was invited to speak on record, but she refused. She didn't want fame, only closure. Instead, she donated the diary and artifacts to a local museum on the condition that the site of the wreck, the old rail spur, be preserved as a memorial. Spring came slowly. The snow melted, revealing earth soft enough for flowers. On a clear April morning, Evelyn stood once more before the old train car. It had been cleaned and restored, its rust sealed beneath a protective gloss. A plaque stood beside it, engraved with simple words. In memory of Clara Winters and the children of Transport 17. May the truth never again be buried beneath the ashes. A soft breeze stirred her hair. Somewhere far off, she thought she heard a faint bark. Light, familiar, echoing through the pines. Evelyn smiled through her tears. Good boy, she whispered. That night, as she locked her cabin door, she paused. The sound of the wind carried faintly across the valley. The long, low whistle of a train, not mechanical, but spectral, soft as memory. She stepped onto the porch and looked toward the dark horizon, where the tracks lay buried beneath grass and time. For a moment she saw it, a faint shimmer of gold light gliding across the trees, moving steady and silent, just as it had the night she found the car. And for the first time in years, her heart didn't ache. It burned, bright and warm. Somewhere beneath the iron sky, the lost had been heard, and the voice that rose through the rails was not one of pain, but of peace. The wind whispered again, carrying a single soft sound, a husky's distant howl fading into the stars.